we met here in Gothenburg. So we made migration from Classic much easier. You can now import application straight into the hub, and any machine steps using OData will automatically be migrated to OData modules. You can now share application packages, including application portal pages and automations across organizations. We've replaced machine workflows with automations. So these can either be triggered through a webhook or set on a schedule, giving you much more flexibility. And we now have support, or soon, very soon, SCIM 2.0 as a replacement for AD-Sync. And that means that you can easily synchronize your users and groups with Microsoft Entra or other identity providers that support this standard. And another new feature is application web links. With these, you can launch application directly, either with parameters or without. It's a simple but powerful way to integrate with ERP systems or share links in emails. And we have added support for translations. So with this single translation table, you can now manage the entire application. Offline support is here. That means you can preload the data you need locally, and your transactions are managed smoothly, even when the client is offline.
The offline capability, Andreas, I find that quite interesting. Let's say that I'm a warehouse manager for a hypothetical furniture store, where my warehouse, the network is really, really bad in there. So I need to run my apps offline. Could you show me how to build a account report app?
Absolutely, Malin. At your service. So offline. When we talk about offline capable applications, there are two building blocks. First, we have preloading of the data you'll need locally. And second, making sure transactions are handled asynchronously once you're back online. So let's start with the local data part. So, as per Malin's request, we're going to build an application for counting per count report, communicating with IFS Cloud using modules. So first, we'll set up the preload of local data. So to do that, we first need a component that will fetch the data from IFS. So we have a component with a couple of modules. And we are also using a component for fetching some user information. And then, by using the modules, we write this query for fetching the counting reports for this user from IFS. And similarly, we also want to get the count report details for those count reports. And then we also need to set the output. So that's the data sets that we will use as our local data. So we'll commit the component. And then we'll switch back to the application and set up the local data resources. So we'll add a local data resource to the canvas, and we'll configure that to use the component we just made. And then we will set the target variable, which we will use in the application for getting the data. And then we'll select the component. And there we go. Now we have the first part of this application, that is that we have defined the data we want to store or fetch to be stored locally. Okay, and the next part is the offline transactions. So in true TV chef fashion, we have already prepared an online version of the application. So now let's see how we can turn it into an offline capable application instead. So here we have our application, we have the local data resource, and we will have a step for selecting the count report that we want to use. And we will fetch the details for that report and then loop through those lines, and the user will enter the counted quantity and we'll save it to IFS Cloud in this instance. And then when everything is counted, we have the option of confirming the lines in IFS, and that will also be saved to the backend system. So now we want to add the offline part of this. So we want to move the machine steps. So what we do is that we add a new swim lane called Q lane, and we want to move the machine steps that saves the data back to IFS into the Q lane. So we'll add this split step, and then we'll take the machine step and move it down to the Q lane. And then we'll do the same thing for the confirmation of lines. We add a split step, move the machine step down to the Q lane. So those machine steps will queue up on the client when they are executed. We'll just add an end step to this. And then we will just configure the crossings. So the crossings, the information or name of the crossing will be visible in the client sync log. You can easily follow what's happening. So now we have offline capability in the application, so commit the application. So now we have an application. So Malin,
Hey.
It's all yours to try it out.
A couple of questions. Is it possible to just use preload data without the Q lane?
Yes, so you can use the application already with the local data part. So that could be useful for downloading a large data set that typically don't change that frequently. So you could have a benefit of that as well.
And what about
Just
expiration date on my data? What happens if it's date sensitive?
Yes, so that's not supported yet, but we are literally working on it as we speak, so that will be available soon.
Good. Then I will do a demo just like Pontus did, live in test. So I have my app, the one that Andreas created for my warehouse count reporting, and in this case I would go into my data to download the preload data required to run the app. So I click on the app, and there are multiple ways to download it, but in this case I just download all for this app. In this case we're using an IFS connector, so it requires me to do an extra step of authentication, which was successful. So go back just to see my app, and then I will go to my warehouse, which is far, far, far down in the basement somewhere. So the network is bad, so I went into flight mode just to replicate that. So now I run this app properly offline. So I can click on the app, and I start it. I select my counterport, I go next, and then I just do the counting. It's making a sound here, I don't know if you can hear that. And that was all the lines I needed to count. So I confirm, and I'm done. So let's now go and look at the transactions that were created. So I go back to the home view, and there is now a second tab here. Before you could only see the local data, and now I can also see sync work. And here I can see all the transactions that I've created. They're still not uploaded because I'm still offline. But if I go and remove the flight mode, you can see that the transactions are uploaded to IFS in this case. And that was the offline app. But there's been quite a lot of questions about translations also. And that was a new feature that both Paul and Andreas mentioned that we have in Flow Connect now. So since I have the app here, let's go and see what happens if I go to Profile, Application Settings, and Language. And one thing you can see here, if you happen to know all the languages by heart, which I do, is that we have a new system language, which is Spanish. So just for fun, let's go Español. And it's now in Spanish. So we go Iniciar Aplicación. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, and that's about all the Spanish I know. We have a colleague at the office, Kevin, who is Spanish. He did try to teach me some words, but he said I sounded like a 3-year-old. But as you can see, Flow is more than 3 years old. So you can see both the user step has been translated, and if I close the app here, you can see that the system language is also being run as Spanish. And since there were a lot of questions about translations, Andreas, would you mind showing us how translations work a bit more detail in Connect?
Absolutely. So let's see if we can stop sharing this maybe. There we go. Okay, so translations. So we now have a centralized translation table called Phrasebook. So this means all your translations are stored in one place, making them much easier to manage. In that table, the name is used as the key, and that's what the application references when it looks up a translation. And if a translation isn't available in the client's language, the system automatically falls back to the default translation. Translation can also include variables, so you can insert dynamic values directly in your text. And on top of that, we support this ICU message format, which makes handling of pluralization and more complex messages much easier. And finally, translations can be used almost everywhere, even inside your client-side scripts, so you can keep your entire application consistent and multilingual. So what is the ICU message format? It's an industry standard for handling translations, which means we're building on something that's widely used and well supported. And the big advantage is that it allows for smarter messages. For example, handling plurals, genders, and other variation in a much more natural way. So think of a notification. So instead of hard coding, you have one message and you have 5 messages. The ICU format lets you define a single rule that covers both cases automatically. And that's what we mean by smarter messages. And since this is a widely used standard, many resources are available online, making chatbots very useful if you want help with these ICU messages. And the result you get can easily be copied and pasted into the phrasebook as it is. So let's take a look at how application translations work directly in the designer. So we can open the phrasebook and all the phrases are available. We can add new ones and we can manage the languages, search and delete phrases, of course. So we'll add a new one here for expense code. We'll add a translation in Swedish. And now, when we go back into a user step, we can obviously use the phrase as it is. So we'll use the flow script phrase, and then we will have all the different phrases available that we can choose from. But we can also easily add translation for existing text. So we can add the text to phrasebook, and then we get a suggestion for the name of the phrase, and we can enter a translation. And if we try to add a text that already exists, we will just use that one instead of creating multiple phrases for the same thing. And it's also possible to add those phrases with dynamic data. So in this case, we have a variable. And then those variables are automatically converted into parameters. So when we add this phrase to the phrasebook, we can see down that it will be converted and the parameter will automatically be sent to that translation. So that's how we can have dynamic data.
That was translations.
That was translations.
Translations offline, I mean, it's really, really nice functionality, but Andreas, between you and me, when no one is paying attention, the Windows designer, it's looking a little bit 1995.
Yeah, well, I actually agree with that statement. The designer looks outdated, and it's true that it's like built on a very old technology stack at this point. So that's why we are excited to introduce the new web designer. So completely rebuilt on modern web technologies. So web designer is actually a bit of a misnomer. We're not designing the web. It's simply designer on the web. But for now, it's convenient to call them Windows Designer and Web Designer. But over time, it will just become the designer. So I will now give you a quick look at what it's like to build an application using the new designer. So we have a new empty application, count reports. So we'll open that in the web designer. And first we'll add a component for fetching some user defaults. So we'll enter the output variable for that. And then we also want to enable an IFS OData module. So we'll search for that. We can find the count per count report and we'll activate that. Now we can use it in a machine step. So we'll add a new machine step. And that will be a custom logic script. So we can use our new or the activated module and write a new query for getting the count reports. So we are getting a lot of help with this autocomplete functionality, so everything available in the module will be visible there. So we can easily write this query. So it's a SQL-like query. And we'll set it to be the user default site. We'll edit the label. And then let's add a user step for the user to select the count report. We'll add a header. And then add a list selection where we'll show all the count reports. We'll select the data source, and then for the title, we'll have the count report number. And as a small text or subtitle, we'll add an information about the number of uncounted lines on this report. And we'll save. And now we'll time travel a little bit. And now, all of a sudden, we have an application. So then we have some small and nice improvements all over the place, but one thing is that we have the button configuration inside the user step, so you can easily set the name of the buttons, and you can also reorder them by just dragging and dropping, so you have them in the correct order. And now we can run the application. That will be in the web client. And the diagnostic panel or debugging capabilities is also available in this client as well, of course. So we'll save the line. And then we'll exit the application and go back to the designer. And now when we want to commit the application, we get a nice summary of all the changes we have done since the last commit we did. So we'll see which steps are modified, added, or deleted. So there we have a new committed application built completely in the web designer. So that was a quick look of what it is to build applications in the web designer. We have done a lot of those kind of small improvements, and we have rethought a lot of things in the web designer. And we have built this on technology that will enable us to do a lot of features going forward when it comes to versioning, maybe seeing the difference, the changes between different versions and so on. And also some collaboration capabilities, of course. So a lot of changes will come, a lot of features will be added. So to summarize, migration of classic workflows using the OData connector. We have share application and portal pages across organizations. We have automations, execute apps via webhook or HTTP request or schedule. We have SCIM 2.0, synchronize users and groups with Microsoft Entra. We have application web links, we have translations for applications, offline capability with data preload and synchronization, and the web designer available as a beta release. So today there are two bigger features that are missing in the web designer, and that is the newly added translations and the offline capabilities. But if you don't need those, you can start actually testing the web designer already. So just reach out to us if you are interested in testing the new web designer, and we can enable it for your organization. So that's the new web designer.